Hello, and welcome to the second ever episode of Tavern Talk. As always, I am your host, Kyle. I am joined by some lovely folks today, and this time I'm going to spice it up. I'll have them introduce themselves. So we'll go around the room. Introduce yourselves.
I guess I'll go. Hello, I'm Jacob. I don't know, what do you want me to say, Kyle? I'm a storyteller at Night Realms. I've been tabletopping since early high school and LARPing since late high school.
Beautiful. Listen, I have no expectations. I'm shooting from the hip. We're doing it live. Steve, introduce yourself. Let the people know who you are and what you believe.
My name is Steve. I've been gaming since childhood. I've been LARPing for 15 years, and I'm the assistant director of Night Realms.
And finally, last but not least.
Hi, I'm Ray. I've been playing D&D since, I think it was late middle school, early high school. So for all of those fossils out there, that's like 2014.
Whoa!
So that's not as long as it appears to be. And then I joined KR back in 2017. I am senior kitchen staff here at KR, and I'm a narrator in training at another LARP.
Yeah, I guess I should also give time to me saying high school, because it doesn't really give anybody anything.
No, it was also 2014.
So yeah, it was 2015 when I started tabletopping, and actually 2016 when I started LARPing at Night Realms. That was my first LARP, and I've been here ever since. And then through college I went to school for game design, so I got really immersed in the community of tabletopping, LARPing, and just games in general.
As if you couldn't guess by us talking about how long we've been role-playing, today's discussion is being the actual players. As last week in the tavern we discussed DMing and game running, this week we're talking about playing games. And
hey, real quick, what is being a player like?
Honestly, I used to know, but after becoming a DM, I kind of forgot. It's a far gone memory. You don't have to think about what's going to happen next so much.
I think you know what it's like to be a player, Steve. I know you do a lot of work, but
I know it's my fun. It's my fun joke.
And you experience it more than you claim to.
Yeah, you listen.
Yeah. It's my fun.
Sorry. Getting into it, I wanted to start the discussion off with a fun topic, which is stereotypes surrounding classes. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I love to play bards and barbarians. And if there's ever two classes that I see constantly joked about, it's bards and barbarians.
Oh boy.
No. Rogues, assassins, you could pick them out without an issue in the world. You look at them and say, that kid in all black wearing that with the samurai sword, that's an assassin. Got it 100% of the time.
Yeah.
I've always made fun of the wizards. I don't know why.
Because they're nerds.
I play a kind of thuggy wizard, so I don't know if I fit that stereotype. I did.
It's a good way to mix it up.
I did fit the rogue assassin stereotype. When I showed up, I was in all black with a samurai sword, and everybody pegged me for it.
Oh boy!
Only in D&D do I fit the bard and or barbarian trope of the bard, of course, being I'm going to, make out with any person that I see.
Yeah.
And barbarian being I'm a dumb meathead and I'm gonna break things.
Yeah.
And it's just fun to play it that way. I just want to go into a room and punch the door in. Who knocks anymore? It's locked? Who cares? Rage. Punch.
Yeah, that's definitely a big one.
There's your stereotype. Barbarians have zero intelligence, which is, I don't know. I always want more than anything to watch the opposition of stereotypes, like the fighter who actually has magic powers, the wizard who just hits people when he's frustrated, like those kind of deals.
Cast fist.
Yes, I want the muscle wizard.
Yeah.
The half-orc that can recite Shakespeare.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, I feel like those are always more fun game environments. When you do have like at least one muscle wizard or something like that going on.
Are there stereotypes surrounding classes that you actually enjoy, and like you enjoy observing them, or you enjoy playing as it, like as that stereotype?
Oh, 100%. Anytime there's like a knight or cavalier class, I'm so into the playing the knight, but like not the weird chivalry knight, but like the stereotypic knight in shining armor who's like just there to do the right thing kind of deal. But also the witch hunter kind of trope. Like, as much as Witcher has really brought that out a lot more, I really just like doing the, like the hell diver kind of Witcher, like witch hunter.
Yeah, I've always liked that one too from afar. Personally, I like to play more of an antagonistic role in most games. I mean, heck, that's self-evident from my first LARP character. But even in tabletops, I usually find some way to have like a major disagreement with the rest of my party. Not to ruin the game, but I always find games more fun when you have that banter going back and forth. And that's a stereotype I like to do. I like to play the necromancer, the obviously evil, I'm over here, and I'm not pretending I'm not evil, guy.
Well, as I said, I thoroughly enjoy being the obnoxious bard that kind of just breaks into song, or like walks up to the bartender and goes, "Hello," or the barbarian that just punches in the locked door. I do find that classes that I'm not used to playing, I tend to not be in that stereotypical mindset, even if I have seen like jokes about it. Like, I'm playing a monk, and there's more character to this monk than I think I've put into any character, really. Because I've never played a monk before, and I'm like, I'm going to take this as serious as I can, because I want to, try something new.
So I feel like there's cause for that. When you have these stereotypes about different classes and archetypes, it's very easy to fall into that dynamic when you're like, I don't have to think about this. I can just do what I already know, what's like muscle memory to what that class is. But then when you're playing something unfamiliar, you have to actually think about what you're doing. You have to think about what kind of character you're playing, rather than just going along with the tropes and the stereotypes, which on either side, there's good and bad to it. I think it's kind of neat to be able to jump into something you like, especially when you're just doing it for fun. It's easy to just jump into the stereotype, play the game that you want to play, and then move on. But when you're going in playing the class that you are unaware of, that you've never done before, or something like that, then like getting to take that time and really think about what you're doing helps. Really, I feel like builds those unique characters that you've never really seen before.
And it's also, I want to build off of that, especially in 5th edition, you can still play the same class, but maybe take a different subclass. Like, if you're a paladin, take a different oath. If you're a barbarian, take a different path. I always go path of the berserker, because punchy fist man.
Oh god, yeah.
But there's like battle mage or whatever it is, where you can just have like battle armor all of a sudden, and I'm like, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, and then there's like, I know there's totem I normally do when I play barbarians, because I try to dip into different stuff. Totem, which just pretty much makes you a meat wall of annihilation. So comboing, I know, like, we were all saying, like, the meathead barbarian, where it's just like, I want to punch things and destroy. That's always a fun twist to give him, like, a 14 intelligence. Make dump, like, your charisma. No one will even know until it, like, comes up, and you're like, I'd like to make an arcana check, and then you're adding all this stuff.
And suddenly, why does that guy know so much about magic? My dad
yeah,
was a
exactly.
wizard.
I will say there is a... I haven't personally seen it, but I feel like there could be an inherently negative side to the stereotypes of certain classes.
Oh god, yeah.
Like, for new
100%.
players especially. Like, and I will speak at least from a bard point of view, because I've played bards the most. You don't have to seduce the dragon. If you run into it, you could just fight it. Like, I feel like some people think that they have to be the flirtatious type and like just make a persuasion roll every time they talk with an NPC, and you don't have to. I actually love to encourage people with bardics using different kinds of art forms other than poetry and music.
Mm-hmm.
And you can get really creative with it. I just think, as funny as some of the jokes are, if people, like, naive people, I should say, take it too seriously and start to believe, oh, this is how all bards act. It's not. It's just some.
So
And we're poking fun at those.
If I could table off of you there, I feel like some of that, though, comes from the environment that the game is in, right? If I'm a new player and I'm a bard and I run into a dragon, you best believe I'm going to try to seduce it, not because I want to be seducing a dragon, but because I'm a bard and I'm a new player and you threw a dragon in front of me. What else am I supposed to do? I'm going through a lot of whiplash like that, even right now, because I've been playing a lot of Baldur's Gate, which, although it's a video game, it's D&D rules. It's computerized. In that first edition Baldur's Gate, it's super hard into you need to be the stereotype of your class, whereas when you look at later editions of D&D in the tabletop sense, they definitely made it a little bit more freeing. And I was a person who started tabletopping with Pathfinder and Savage Worlds, which were very open and give you a lot of creative freedom that you don't see in some of the earlier versions of tabletop rules. And I feel like we got a lot of those.
The spells on the bard list also definitely like lend itself more to being more than just the I like mind control monsters deal.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. This is a little curious, and it's a little off topic, but I'm kind of curious as players how you got into role-playing, because I got into role-playing games through the back door. I didn't start with actual role-playing games. I started with role-playing on Roblox. Remember Roblox? Yeah, and then it turned into like forums. There was like roleplay.com or whatever, and then I finally started doing improv D&D, and then eventually I was like, okay, I should actually learn how to play this game, and then actual D&D came.
Oh boy. Oh boy. Oh, we're going that far back? Oh.
That far back? That's like yesteryear.
I'm everybody's worst person. So...
Yeah, I'm like, let me dust off the embarrassing stories pile.
oh, mine just makes me look bad, and I feel like I'm a bad person every time I bring it up. But like, it's okay. It's a funny story, because I was definitely wrong. Like in high school, I was definitely very much of like a jock. I was on the football team, wrestling team, field, definitely not track, but field. And I would make fun of my buddy Andy, best friend, known him for more than half my life at this point. But I'd make fun of him because he would do tabletop and eventually started LARPing at Night Realms. And that went on for about like 2 years. Every time we brought it up, I'd just be like, people don't talk about that stuff, man. And there was one day that I lost a bet and I had to get in a D&D session with him. And I went into it and I had fun. So we did it again and again. And, I just shut up. But I still made fun of him for LARPing. And then around 2015, I lost another bet eventually. And I had to go with him LARPing and I hated it. My first event at Night Realms, I absolutely hated. It was not a good time. There was like a lot of just stuff going on, and I wasn't going to go back. And it was actually, I don't know why I decided to go back a second time, but it was that second event, because I feel like I got it more that event. It was a blast. I don't know. Getting into it is always a weird weird journey, and I'm interested to hear how you guys did, because I always feel like it's rocky in the very beginning, especially introducing other people to it.
I think Steve's got like an ancient story to tell.
you want to go first, Steve?
Yeah, you go ahead.
Yeah, why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, I don't think mine's nearly as long since I haven't been doing it, like... so, okay. I have been role-playing as a whole longer than I've been playing D&D. So, I don't actually have a timestamp, tragically, for this. I just remember I didn't even have, like, a good cell phone yet. Like, dusting off my iPod, like, 4th generation, like... I'm like, oh boy, I got Instagram, you know? I started role-playing on Instagram. It's so bad. And like, I started in, like, cringy anime communities. So it just keeps going downhill from there. So, and it made a big deal on my life, though. So it gave me joy. It improved my grammar. So, you know, I think in the end, I'm not ever gonna complain about it. So because of that, I went to, like, anime clubs in my local town, because of my library ran them. And because of that, you know, I meet people, I make friends, and next up I know, my friends are like, I'm having a birthday party. And I'm like, man, you're my friend, but I don't like you enough to go. But I decided to go, because I liked a lot of the other people that were going. And after the birthday party, they were like, yeah, you know, we're gonna go back to so-and-so's house and play D&D. Do you want to go? My thought process on D&D was, I was not big on the concept at all, even though I was previously a role player and did all that other stuff. But because of who was going, I was like, sure, why not? You know, I'll give it a try. And kind of very similarly to Jake, I had a lot of fun. And from there, we kept meeting up again, and it went on for a couple years. That group was I was in that group for a very long time until, recently, well, actually, recently, not so much anymore, but, until I ended up dropping out. But, when I was in that group, they didn't help me get into LARPing, though. They all seemed very, like, by the concept. None of them really ever seemed interested in it, but I found out because I went to a cosplay event. So again, because of anime, I found out about LARPing. I went to a cosplay event, and it was one of those, like, on ice ones where you put on roller skates and you roller skate in a cosplay. And when I was skating, I have my skates on in the most disgusting fashion. I'm in, like, my wig that's way too long for ice skating, and, like, you know, all the good fun things, you know, the things that ice skaters fear when they see me. I get on the ice, and I'm screwing up. I'm going back and forth. It's one of my first few times ice skating, so, like, I had no idea what I was doing. And here I go. I'm skating, and I go kaboom right into somebody. I think I fall. Yes, I fell. And who picks me up? Rebecca. Reba. Somebody in our community. Plays Faedith. She helps me up. And I'm like, wow, I love your I love what you got going on. I love your costume. I love your cosplay. And I'm explained that it is a elf character. I think she might have still been a sylph at the time. Either way. This character from a LARP, and I was like, whoa, a LARP? And at the time, people slowly started telling me about LARPs. I was told about Mystic Realms, but in the end, when then suddenly another LARP got told to me that people were like, come play with us, you know, we'll help you get involved, I was all about it. And, like, my first event was one of Chris Zupato's events, so I was all about it. I decided to go, because I was like, yeah, you know, I'll go in, like, February or March, because I'm definitely not ready for January. I don't have a character, I don't have anything. And then a week before the event, I figured out the plot, and I was like, whoa. Like, I was super drawn in by the plot. So here I am, now haphazardly trying to, in January, unaware that it is going to dump buckets of snow onto the campground, throw a costume together. I was torn between all these different characters, because back when I started playing, there wasn't so much freedom in racial options yet, so there was those set ones, and that's what existed. So I'm like shoveling around my cosplay-filled room, because that was before, you know, you had a ton of LARP gear, and I had made a hat A lot of people know it's the hat. Dun dun dun. I had made a hat for one of my D&D characters. Funny enough, Reno. She was started out as a D&D character, and I made a hat that I could wear when we were sitting at our tabletops. So I was like, and I had a wig that vaguely looked like when I made the character. I had a wig that very closely looked like the white-haired elf that I made. So I was like, ooh, okay, I can get this rolling. I have armor that my friends let me borrow. Getting told, make sure you bring socks and socks and socks. Don't forget socks. My shoes didn't last more than 5 minutes on that campground. I borrowed a pair of shoes. Which I think a lot of people's first events turned into oh, here, I have one of these you can borrow. My sword was borrowed. I think the only thing I didn't borrow was the hat on my head, which I didn't even wear my first event because of all the snow and rain, which I don't think I was fully ready for my first event. I came in on a Saturday because I had obligations that Friday. It ended up being a lot of fun. I kind of really got interested right out the gate of my first event. I bumped into some old friends. My first few events, like I bumped into Sam Poland while he was on his NPC shift, and I knew him from the cosplay community, so it was kind of interesting. And like, yeah, Jake said, your beginning's always really rocky, because I found that my second event, I full-time NPC'd. I don't remember why. I think I was trying to like snag some of that early, like some of that build as a newer player, and just trying to get used to the ropes of the rules by being an NPC, so I wouldn't have to worry about screwing something up as my I think I had 11 body or 12 as my super frail. I think I was a swashbuckler. Yeah, I did not want to mess that up. My second event was really bad. I ended up leaving early. I left Saturday morning. I couldn't drive at the time, so luckily my friends were all my friends that brought me up were leaving. It was like nobody's fault really. It was like I had a complication. I had to sleep in the barn back when you slept in the barn. The fire never took off, and it was a mixture of like things that weren't really anyone's fault. I think it was like disgustingly snowy again. It was really a factor that was no one's fault. So I kind of just left and then came back when it was warmer, because trying to start as a new player in the colder months sometimes when you're not ready and just don't have friends who have been playing long enough is really brutal. Because I came in with a bunch of people who had like attended only a couple events. But other than that, after that, I came back in like April, and then it only went up from there. I very quickly made a lot of friends, and it was just nice from there. So there you go. That's the saga of me that felt like me talking for a while, so I'm sorry.
No, you're good, man. Steve.
So, I have a weird way of doing this. I didn't do any form of role-playing, tabletop, anything outside of console gaming until after I started LARPing. I went to a LARP first.
Ooh.
Which
Spicy.
was a disaster of a choice. I mean, I say it was a disaster of a choice, but like it worked out in my favor. And for, some people will find it to be a valuable thing. Like, even you're starting on role-playing on Instagram, like, that's great. Like, I feel like it's no service to discredit these other mediums that people start off in. I think that's awesome that, like, when I started, we didn't have, here I go. When I started, we didn't have these other technologies to do this kind of stuff with.
There it is.
Grandpa Steve.
So 15, going on 16 years ago, I went to my first LARP with about 2 weeks' notice because a friend of mine said,
Yeah, no, keep going.
A friend of mine said, hey, you want to go to a LARP? And I was like, what's that? And not even like the inquisitive, just like, oh, what's that? Why are we doing this? Why am I going? What do you want from me? And so I didn't have a costume. I looked at the website, was like, assassin. That looks like a fun class.
Oh
I'll play
boy.
that one.
I'm gonna jump off
starts.
that one later because I want to do the same thing, and stereotypes stopped me, and that's why I was a swashbuckler.
Oh, no. I was like, I'm going to play an assassin. I'm going to be a sneaky murder boy. Like, it'll be great. It'll be a lot of fun. I'm going to do it because why not? Let's go for it. So I did have a costume. I like cobbled together some absolute garbage. And 2 weeks later, we went to the event, and it was in August, so it was like a nice weather event, but it was also raining the whole time, and I was not prepared. It was probably the worst experience I've ever had in anything in my life. Like, as far as, online or like gaming in general goes, like, it was absolutely miserable.
Oh.
I hated it. I hated everything about it. There was nothing fun that happened. Like, I could, whereas I could say, some others would say, like, it wasn't the fault of the game, it wasn't anything that anyone did. It was a lot of things that a lot of people did. It was a lot of things that just went down, like the rain was bad, and also, like, I did not get the new player experience of, like, being helped in figuring it out.
Aww.
It was just, go in, get there, do it. Like, you figure it out on your own. Obviously, since then, reform has happened at Night Realms, especially, like, we have really pushed to avoid that kind of circumstance. But I left that event going, that sucked. I spent money to do that, and that was awful. Why did I do this? But because I'm wired weird, and my brain tells me to do things, I thought, that sucked. I don't like that. I don't like that I didn't have fun. So I'm going to go back, and I'm going to have fun. I decided because it was so bad that I was like, no, this can't suck that bad. This can't be that bad. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to make sure I have fun. And so from there, my second event was better, which was great because I went back literally the next month. I was like, nah, I'm just going right for it. And it was so weird because, like, I was going into the winter months, so immediately I was still unprepared, and I never really got that full preparation, but I had the value of, like, my first event, the good value that happened out of it, the good things that happened out of my first event was I met a few people who immediately were like, you are new, come hang out with us. Like, I came in with a group of 12 people, but they all left immediately. Like, none of them lasted longer than 3 months.
Yeah.
Or a few of them did, but I was left alone, so I immediately got picked up by this other group. So that was a nice buffer to that. And I got picked up by, like, all the people I've now known for so long in my life. So yeah, I went back and I started having fun, and only after, like, my second event did I finally play D&D, and I was like, now I gotta learn how to roleplay? What even is this? How do I game? Like, I was so bad at, like, I was really bad at gaming too. Because, like, I played in Diablo 2. I was playing Diablo 2 around that time, and I was so bad at gaming, I didn't understand how skill trees worked. So I just, like, bought every skill and for anyone who knows the class, Necromancer in Diablo 2, I just, like, picked everything, so I was bad at everything.
Oh, no.
Like, that was my level of understanding of gaming, and I still played, like, Final Fantasy games, too, which was even, like, I don't know how I beat them. So, needless to say, I went in almost completely blind to what it is to, like, even play this kind of game style, like, any kind of role-playing game. And so I went back, I had more fun, I was like, okay, I think I'm getting the hang of this, and I kept going back, and I was, in fact, that kid in the all black playing the assassin who was very obvious about it. And, like, I was this very clear stereotype of, like, this very clear trope that you can just point at and go, we know exactly what that's about, we know he's an orphan, we know all this, like, you look at him, like,
I was just about to say, I've
like,
seen the pictures.
He's an orphan, he's on a revenge quest, he's playing an assassin, he's got some, like, keepsake from the parents' death kind of deal, like, it was perfect how absolutely tropey it was. And so that's what I had to start as because I didn't know any better and I didn't know anything. And so, my story ended up building over the years that I played. But, like, my first 2 years, I had to, like, self-teach the whole setup because we didn't have any of these, or at least we did have these new player training things, but they weren't good at doing what they should have done. It was a very different time then. LARPing wasn't so publicly known that you had all these resources to kind of like look up and learn about. It was what the game provided at the time, and what the game provided at the time was only what they knew, as far as instead of like what the outside world knew. And like I said, since then we have done strides to change that like increase that knowledge base and work on how to introduce people into a game. But basically, I got dropped into LARPing without any role-playing experience, just head first, and said, this sucks. I want to have fun though, and so I did. And so for 15 years, I have been LARPing, and then D&D, and then getting into other forms of like tabletopping and role-playing and all that jazz.
Yeah. So.
I kind of want to build off of something.
I was just about to say, I would love to build off of something that you also said.
Do you think there is an inherent responsibility of veteran players to kind of bring in and help out new players?
I mean, I'll start this one off. LARP, if we're going off of LARP is a social game. No matter how you swing it, it is a social game. It requires social interaction. So I think it is the response. It kind of goes off of my like general ethical philosophy, in that if you have the ability to do something to help someone, it is your ethical responsibility to do so. And so when it comes to LARP, if you have the ability to impart some kind of wisdom on someone or help someone in a capacity that is within your means, then it should be your responsibility to do so, because you helping that person only helps everyone else. It's where I keep talking about this, like, I say I talk about it, but it's one of those things that have gone around the different LARP circles and all the different game communities over the years, is this unwritten rule of 10 feet. The rule of 10 feet is if you see somebody within 10 feet of you looking like they're not doing anything, looking like they're bored, you get them involved in whatever you're doing in the moment. Like, if someone within 10 feet of you isn't having fun, make sure they are. And that is the social contract responsibility of all gamers in especially social games.
Yeah, and I'm really glad because you saying that. I'm watching people do that at KR too, because I, as Reno, recently started spending a lot of time. Well, I did it previously, but normally I had people standing around me, but it hasn't been happening as much. But I'll be sitting on a table by myself, typically meditating or praying. I'm doing role play, but I'm by myself, and it looks like I'm sitting there about to like faceplant into my hands, like in a sleep, and people will come up to me and be like, "Hey, you okay, buddy?" Like they'll start RPing with me, and I'm like, "Oh yeah, no, I'm fine. I'm just doing this thing." And they're like, "Oh, okay, we thought you were like, yeah." And I'm like, "No, I'm good." So it's nice to see because like it works. Like people are doing it, and people are looking out for each other, and all that does is help strengthen a community.
What were you gonna build off of, Ray?
Oh my goodness. Oh, yeah, you're good.
No, go for it.
The rogue, the stabby assassin. So I feel like that, at least I don't know if it's as bad anymore. I played a rogue alt, but I dealt with different stereotypes as a hobgoblin Enaxian jerk. So that's its own mode. But
Enaxian being like kind of authoritative, the god of authority, which often gets viewed as like the god of tyranny.
Yes, correct, yeah. And that's a whole different thing I'll probably get into at some point, but because that was a whole different gameplay that I've experienced, rather than my goody only wants to get better dragoon dude. But so with rogues, when I first came to the game, it was several years ago, so it was older renditions of the books. I pointed at assassin, and I told my friends, which out of all of them, the only one that I even still have that I really talk to is Rebecca. And I pointed at assassin because I wanted to be a dragoon, but I couldn't because back in the day, certain races could not play certain bloodline classes. I put in quotes. And the bloodline classes were like Dragoon, Healer, yada yada. I could not play a Scion or a Dragoon as a Quinarian. So I looked at it and I said, well, maybe one day, Space Cowboy, little did I know. But I pointed at Assassin and I was like, I want to play this one. And all my friends went, oh, you can't do that. And I was like, but why? And it was because, the assassins at the game are constantly having problems because they're getting, like, thrown in jail and they're robbing people and doing this and that and poisoning food. Like, I got blasted. Utterly blasted with so much drama. Yes.
Caught.
I wanted to commit crime. Believe it or not, me as Rita wanted to commit crime. And I got blasted up the wall for wanting to play an assassin. So I was like, okay, I like this one. And it was Swashbuckler. Took up Swashbuckler, and then 4 games later, what was my second list? Assassin! So it did nothing anyway, and I kind of broke that stereotype a little bit too, because Rena walked around being this smiley, flashy. I still wore black. Don't get me wrong, I still wore black and red and had the dead parent backstory. Like, I'll give everyone that one. I still had that edgy ass backstory. It was still there, but I didn't look like it. So when you go around smiling with 10 feet worth of makeup plastered on your face, looking like you only want to help people, which, I mean, when you did, but also you wanted to definitely steal, they didn't see it coming. So, but you still dealt with a lot of the stereotypes, which is why I think a lot of, like, when I was an assassin, I didn't make it very clear. Because of the... Yeah, it was really bad. You dealt with a lot of it, like, oh, don't go near the Rogues Guild because, like, you know, then you'll be stuck there forever, and from there you'll only go downhill, and you'll be evil forever, and, you know, air quote evil, because in the end, being part of a Rogues Guild doesn't make you evil, like burning down an orphanage makes you evil, you know?
I hear...
Well, that's only if the orphans are inside.
Well, touche,
yeah. And I'm like, your friends don't know how to have a good time, because...
Also that, it was...
Sorry. But I very much have a lot of fun playing those, like I said, antagonistic roles. You just gotta know what you're getting into. And when your friends are like, oh, they're getting thrown in jail all the time, I feel like if you're down to get thrown in jail all the time, yeah, go play the thief, go play the assassin. Yeah. That's a fun thing to do. And
it's also that, so that becomes a matter of role-playing. Obviously, I'm not opposed to... that roleplay, that was, you know, what I was half going into, and it definitely comes down to, if that's the RP you want, then that's the perfect route.
And I think, that's a good point to kind of go over to, next thing, which is, and I kind of am curious to hear what you have to say about this, in regards to the LARP aspect, because I only really understand, because I'm still baby in regards to LARP, the relationship between a player and the game runner or dungeon master, and how vitally important that is. What do you think can really make or break the relationship between the two?
I know I had one that instantly kind of procced in my head, which was, it's really important, like, in training as a game runner, or just as a, like, plot runner, it is really, really important that when you walk out as your PC, that people aren't afraid to talk to you. Like, it's really unnerving when, you're put up on this really high pedestal because, oh, you do the big things, you do the special things that make this game happen, you know? And it's something that trying to make sure that you talk to the community, even the brand new players, talk to the veterans, like, try not to make sure that you spread yourself out so that the game knows you as, oh, you know, you're this person with this character and you run plot, not, oh, you're this storyteller. Like, people know you. It's bad when people know you're a storyteller before anything about you.
because you're a player. Like in this game at least, you're a player too. You're not just staff.
I wouldn't say that's a bad thing, but I agree with you. If you asked me like 2 years ago, 3 years ago, I would have said that like the most important thing is making a big impression right off the bat, but that's not true. Really, the relationship between like a game runner and the player, it's all social. We've been saying that like LARP is a social game, and I feel like the biggest hamperers of that are traditional like social hamperings, just like rumors and gossip. I don't know. Games are always more fun when you go in knowing that everybody's here to have a good time, and when things change and things shift and have like sour undertones to them, it always gets weird, especially if that's not what anybody in the like environment is looking for. And that's like a good note. Like it's a sour note, but it's a good note to bring up. Is you definitely want to make sure that at least you as a person, and you're checking yourself, and you're going, I'm here to have fun. Let's not do those things that people did in high school, because I don't know. You see it in a lot of different communities, like tabletops, LARPs, card games. Even I've seen it where you get those little like high school cliques forming. And honestly, the best thing everybody in those cliques or in like situations caused by that kind of ambiance can do is to step back and just enjoy themselves. Because at the end of the day, like, I'm here for my friends. My friends are here, hopefully, for me. But, like, I'm here to have fun. I drive 4 hours to go to Night Realms. I wouldn't be doing that if I was here to be negative.
Yeah.
Where am I going with this? DMs and players should be more positive on their outlook. You're all here to have fun. It's like an event. Be excited for the party. Don't be like angry for the party.
I think there's also an aspect of know what you like and what you don't like.
Yeah.
And my example of this is my first impression of LARP was it was overcomplicated, it was just really complex to me, but that wasn't LARP itself. That was the game we were specifically running, and the people who ran it were great people. I just recognized that, the amount of stuff I needed to do to build up my stats was a lot of math and a lot of complex thing that my brain was like, what? And I think as a player, know what you like and see what the DM is offering, and it's okay. It's extremely okay to go into a game, try it out, and if you don't like it, just be like, hey, I'm not having as much fun, but y'all are, so I'm going to back out. And they will recognize that and appreciate your honesty. And I think being honest to yourself and to your party is incredibly important.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure.
If there is one thing that I will forever shout about on the player DM relationship, it's the DM is not your enemy. And if your DM is acting in a way where you feel like they're just trying to make this plot hurt you as the player and make it unfun for you as the player, leave that game. Your DM is not good. And I'll plainly say that, like, if your DM is writing a game to make you not have fun because they think they're trying to beat you, then they're not a good DM. And the same goes the converse for the players. If you as players are hiding you as players shouldn't hide what you're trying to do to interact with the DM's plot. The DM, if they're a good DM, they are there to help you tell the same story. Tell your DM what you want to do, and your DM will respond in kind. And I think that is an important relationship that needs to kind of start, be built from the start.
Yeah.
Is once both sides really start keeping it secret from the other, or the DM tries to start beating the players and the players start trying to hide from the DM, just cut it. Cut the game. You've lost it. Start over. But that part of that open communication, that that trust in that relationship is so important in making a good game. In whether it's tabletop or LARP or anything, like you need that kind of trust in there that like I'm not here to write a story that'll make you feel bad, and you're not here to try and get one over on my plot by trying to pull something that I didn't account for to see if I trip up. Like, how does that help anybody? Nobody, like, that's not fun for anyone. So I think like if that's my pedestal is the DM is not your enemy and the players are not your enemy.
Yeah, I hard agree with that. Like, because that really makes communication is so important because you're not trying to tear each other down. You're trying to build a story together and have fun.
Yeah, and like to go off of that, like that whole concept was actually opened up to me by Steven. I had something in my head for one of my for Moose, where I was gonna like go kill a god or something, and out of game I'm like, I'm never gonna do this, so why would I ever bring this up? And then I got a message from Steve like, hey, I heard you were trying to do this, don't hide this behind my back. And I feel like the dialogue in that story has gotten a lot better, because like I'm also not going out with an unreasonable expectation on an out of game level, but letting the DM know can only ever like really benefit those interactions where even if you feel like it doesn't matter, let them know. At the worst, they'll just write it off.
But at best, their story changes because they now know what the players want out of their story.
Yeah. And I have to just kind of piggyback because as a DM and as a player, feedback, I've noticed as a DM, is the best thing you can give me.
Yeah.
If you don't tell me what like I did wrong in your eyes as a DM, I can't fix the problem. I'm very grateful.
But also, please tell us what we did right.
Yeah.
Do
like,
both.
I mean, yeah, it's very much both, so that we know, and like tell us what you want. Like they said, I am very grateful for the players I have in my one campaign. We just had our first session, and there were some things that they didn't like, and I told them, hey, you tell me, and I will rectify the situation. I'll fix it. I can't fix what previously happened because it happened, but moving forward, I'm going to make sure that stuff like that doesn't happen and that you have a better time. Because at the end of the day, it's about not only the player's enjoyment, but the DM's enjoyment as well.
Yeah, I mean, the DM, in my opinion, is just as much as a player as the players, but they're playing a different game. And it's just different games that work together. They have different game loops, like rewards, and like reasons you get that endorphin, that rush of playing it. Yeah, and everybody should be considered.
I think that's a platform I've stood on for a long time. Since most of the time very, very alone, is that the DMs and your GMs and your storytellers are players too.
I do, because we are kind of talking about the relationship. Every session, good session, in my opinion, has some kind of a plot. It's either major or minor. It's something to keep the players moving forward. As a player, do you think it is okay to sometimes, or oftentimes, just go astray from whatever the plot is? And if so, why? And also, how often do you, what do you think of the amount of trust you put into the DM to have a plot that can entice you? Like, how much trust can you put into the DM to have an enticing and entertaining plot?
I really like that question, namely because I feel like it has to do with the social contract that you're signing when you get into it. Did you sign up to play a tabletop dungeon crawl? Yes or no? Yes. Do not immediately leave the dungeon, buy 20 donkeys, and start a farm. Experience of me running a campaign, and that's what my players did, and it turned into Farmville. Did we have fun with it? Yes. Did I have anything prepared for it? No, because I was prepared for a dungeon crawl. And then at a LARP, I feel like you're signing a different social contract where you're encouraged to explore. Now, the LARP might be very specific, I I'm blanking on examples, but they might have like one very core theme that they're trying to get across, and then yes, you stick to that theme. But if it's like an adventure or something akin to Night Realms, you don't always need to stay on the plot. There's other stuff going on, there's other people to interact with. A lot of times you can make your own fun when it comes to a role-playing game, and you just gotta really look at what you're signing up for.
Yeah.
I think you can reasonably, like, as far as reasonable expectations is and trust is, you can trust, or you should trust, that your DM is going to give you the story that they have presented. Now, when you're a DM, it's far and few between that a DM will stray from their own plot of their own volition, because the amount of work that goes into just writing it like, you really don't want to stray from that. And you know, and as a player, the DM has planned something fun for you, so you gotta give into that trust and say, all right, we'll go along. If there's some railroaded elements, which there usually are more of in D&D than there are in LARP, you go along with those railroaded elements because you know they're going to lead to the thing that, like, the DM has written that they're excited about for you. And as a player, like, I think there's reasonable leeway to kind of stray away, but as long as you're still following the route and, like, you know, touching on things out just slightly outside of the path that the DM is leading you on, I think you can, like, it's still a working relationship where you can have a little bit of that fun of, you go into the bar, there's the you know, the meme that you see on Facebook, there's that spooky guy in the corner, and then there's Sam Smorkle the goblin. Like, talk to Sam Smorkle for a little bit, but then go to the guy who's obviously the plot hook.
I'm kind of torn, and, you know, curse my gray mentality where I'm always looking at the middle ground. I think it really, and going off of what Jacob said, is based on the kind of social surrounding. Like, if you know the DM, and you know what they can do, and if you know that they can handle kind of going off of their story a bit, then I would say so. Like, I don't mind if people derive from my story, because I love improv and thinking of things on the spot. So, in a sense, I'm, like, always ready for anything, because I just want them to explore and have fun. And if going off of my plot creates more fun for them, then I'm going to allow it. But
well, that's communication with your DM. Like,
Yes,
you wouldn't do that. You wouldn't go to a convention to play in a D&D game and then do that to a DM you've never met before. You do that to someone you know because you've already had that open communication. You already know what what those expectations are.
Yeah.
You don't get that with, like, a random tabletop.
And you just said the big thing that I was definitely going to go into, which was, like, there's that level of communication and almost like comfort zone that you have with sometimes not even just the DM, but the other players at the table when it comes to D&D. Because I find for me, when I go and I play AL, so I do Adventurers League. And that is for the most part, it's me, one person I know, a table full of people I'm unfamiliar with, and a DM I've never played with before. Now that DM, I'm going to be a lot more, no matter what kind of character I have. Like, I have this, no matter what kind of player, not a player, but so much character, sorry, I'm tripping up on myself. It's something that, like, I'm going to try to behave a little bit better because I understand that DM is going off of a specific set of guidelines that they have to in order to follow underneath Adventures League, because it has all these guidelines and specific plots. Like, they can't write their own plot. Now, my friend running his own campaign, I'm going to play that pain in the butt bard who is wanted for, like, high treason, you know? Like, and kind of sometimes ping pong out of that line. But of course, we've had that talk, like, you okay with being wanted for high treason? Because that's kind of a lot. Like, it's something that I feel like it comes down to the campaigns and communication being key again.
You also got to worry about, like, hijacking. So say you decide you want to go off and do all these things on the outside of what the DM has planned. What about the other players in your game? There's anywhere between, like, 2 or 6, like, potentially 6 other people that you're now, like, hijacking this game from. And so I personally don't think there is one definitive answer to that question. I think always it's going to depend on who are your players, who is your DM, what is the game, how long have you known each other. Like, there's so many factors that play into whether or not, like, what your your boundaries are that you can work within.
Yeah, and then like for LARPing, I feel like that's such a different playground, just because, for example, witch hunter plot. I like it. I'm not a witch hunter. I don't get super into it. So if it's a plot like that where sure it doesn't take a lot to entertain me. So it's like if it comes up and it's like, oh okay, that seems like interesting. I'll try to keep tight, like not a super tight loop on it. So I'll keep a loose grasp. So if somebody's like, hey, Reno, what's happening? I could be like, oh, this thingamabobber and the doo-wah. Like, I could kind of explain it. But again, a lot of that fun then, in a world so grand, like Trevance and Arwen and all of that, you don't have to run the tight line of following a storyline. You can create stories of your own where you're literally sitting out in the woods with like 10 other people doing something else. Like
and that brings me on one of my notes I took down about this topic in particular, about following plot is more than just listening to what DM says, but also following the story itself. And when you have, and this is kind of particular to long running campaigns, for a D&D game it's a lot easier, but when you talk about campaign LARPs, games that have been running for 3-4 plus years, I have learned in my time a plot has a 2-year lifespan. No matter what you do, a plot lasts 2 years. And the reason I say this is because after 2 years, players come in, players leave, and you get new crowds. And when you've spent 2 years introducing this plot and like really running it, you're probably, if you're not nearing the end of it, you're probably only midway or only like a third of the way through. And when you're that far in and and your entire player base for that plot is now brand new people, you've completely lost the story because none of those new people know the story firsthand.
Yeah.
It's all word of mouth stuff. It's all what they've seen written somewhere else, and it's all telephoned information. So basically, every 2 years, if you're running this long-term plot, you've got to reintroduce it completely. Reintroduce the characters, the concept, the story, the base goal of it always has to kind of like be redone. And like my experience from that has been both being a long-term player watching that kind of rotation happen, and also being on the DM side of it, because I made the mistake of running a 6-year-long plot once and then did it again. For whatever reason, I did it again. But I watched my plot, like the original plot story that was going to happen with it was completely different from what the actual ending became, because as I had to keep resetting the story in a sense of like reintroducing everything, I more or less had to keep shifting what the ending of it was, because the players involved were a completely different group who had a very different desire out of that story. So when you're following, as a player and as a DM, and when you're following plot, you have 2 years to tell a story before you realistically have to change it. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it is an important thing to remember, because it also makes it more accessible to those new people. Mm-hmm. Because as you keep reintroducing it, you allow those new gaps, those new doorways for people to come in and learn the plot again in a way that makes it feel like they're not stepping into something that's so far out that they're like, why, like, why am I coming into this? I'm so far back from what's going on. Why am I bothering playing it? I feel so overwhelmed.
Yes, like, yeah.
By constantly refreshing that, you get out of that kind of struggle. But that's my thought on that one.
Do you think there is a way to keep a story, like building off of what you just said, raised another question arise? Do you think there is a way to kind of keep a plot going where a good core of the original players had left and you're introducing new players without having to backtrack so much?
Oh, absolutely. That's why like I learned that. I learned that the hard way, having to play it that way. I'll use an example of it. I ran a plot based around 15 songs. The original story of that was.
That one.
So here's where you get you, Ray, and Jacob get to learn firsthand how this came about. At the very beginning of it, the 15 songs were written as like these songs of the apocalypse. Basically, if all 15 were sung, the end of the world would come, or like a great calamity would come. And so the objective of the plot was to not sing those songs. And then a couple years went by. The whole player base and the whole group of players that were originally a part of it left, and so they never got to the point where they learned those songs were bad. And so when I reintroduced this plot for new people, it came to be that like they liked the songs, they wanted to know more about them, they wanted to really delve into the history of them. So I said, okay, let's shift gears. Now we want these. And so I kept introducing them, and they started learning more about them, and I made them less on the side of they will create the apocalypse or create this calamity, and turned it into they have something to do with the calamity. I made it vague so that I could change direction very easily. And rather than rehash all the old information about them, about the two that were originally out, I put out new ones and said, those two are done, here's new information. Focus on this part of it. That the past happened. You don't need to worry about that. Focus on the future. And so with that plot, I had the luxury of each song was basically a miniature arc where I could set new reset points. And then a couple years later, the crowd that was involved once again shifted, and it became, well, now everybody likes these songs. They want to sing these songs. This current group is excited about them, and we can tie them into something where it's a good thing. So singing these songs is potentially a good thing now. And so that's like, as you now saw, the whole point of where it ended up is the singing those 15 songs led to the result of the PCs, the heroes gaining access to a specific power while also keeping a little bit of that original flavor in where it was a bad thing, where the person leading everyone along used it as his own means to like do his nefarious plan, but also still help the players. But like that original story never really got to anyone until like you hear about it later on and go, oh, okay. But there's my example of having to reset those expectations, reset the story as it progresses because it went on so long.
With that, I think this is a fine point to bring up the... as you know, Tavern Talk, we are the official podcast for Night Realms. Night Realms is a LARPing community, and it's an excellent one at that. And I'm definitely not biased because I pay to go there. I genuinely, from experiencing other LARPs, I think KR is a very good LARP community, and it's also very good mechanic-wise for new players. So go to nightrealms.com. You can create your character card today for free. And also, feel free to go and join us on Patreon. We have a lot of wonderful rewards, at least I think so, as far as Patreon goes. So yeah, Night Realms, who will you be? And now, this is another topic I'm also kind of curious about to hear from you guys, is how to get more out of your DM as a player. And to specify what I mean by that, as a player, obviously we've established you are part of the story. You are also creating the story. What are some good tips for other players and kind of tricks to kind of get more from their DM so that they can advance their character?
Okay, I got something. So I'm going to talk specifically about LARP here, and I'll let somebody else talk about tabletop. But although I'm pretty sure Steve is going to want to talk about LARP too. From my perspective, as a player, the way I've always gotten more out of the game runners, out of like the plots that I'm involved with, is when I'm given an option of do it or don't do it, and they hint that it's bad. I usually legitimately weigh that option and do it. Granted, that's because I play a very chaotic character, but knowing when to stick to your guns and like staying with the theme of your character, staying in that headspace, and knowing full well that it's not about winning or losing, because you can never win a LARP, it's all one big story, but just knowing when to really hold your own and go with what you want to do will always make you shine in a crowd, and when you're that person that everybody goes, hey, look at that guy, you usually get more involved in the plot. People come to you now to get into the plot, and because LARP is a social game, the more social you are about it, the more you get involved. A lot of people don't go to the guy grumbling in the corner. They go to the guy who's talking about what's going on. Granted, the guy grumbling in the corner might have an interesting character, but not as many people are interacting with them. They're not getting the benefit of that social aspect to the game. And I think the theme that we've kind of talked about is LARP is very social, and everything kind of needs to fall in line with that. So the TLDR of how do you get more out of the game, you be a very vocal and social character and make people know that you're part of the story rather than just ambiently sit on the side.
I can say from a tabletop point of view, and I guess this also translates well over to LARP, is don't be afraid to pitch ideas. Obviously don't go in it with the attitude of, no, I want this to happen, so do this. Go in it with the attitude of, hey, in case you need ideas, I had an idea of what you could do with this character, maybe this would be a cool thing to have people interact with, and so on and so on. At least from my standpoint, I like when people give me ideas and trust me with them, because that's kind of that's them saying, hey, I trust you with telling a story, and I have an idea to kind of throw in there if you don't mind. And I love that, because it kind of gets you into it more as a player if they choose to use your idea.
Yes, yeah, I agree with that a lot.
I will start. I've got this is obviously I have a lot on all this kind of stuff. So this I will say, don't make demands. As a player, when you're trying to get more from your DM, don't ever make demands. Mm-hmm. Ask questions. Mm-hmm. If you say, I want to do this, there's a portal open and you're trying to close it, and you say, I'm going to close the portal, rethink that statement. Say, can I try and close the portal? Can I close the portal? Can I do this to do this? When you ask a question of your DM, they are far more receptive to acquiescing to that request. They are far more willing to work with you when you approach them in a way that makes it sound like you're also willing to work with them. Which brings me to the second side of this topic is a lot of people go around talking about the yes and kind of storytelling, which is really great for improv acting. Yes and really works for improv acting because that's the whole nature upon which it's built. It's I say something and you build upon it without disagreeing. I'm not going to say something and you're going to tell me no, that didn't happen. You're going to say yes, that did happen, and also this. However, I do not believe the yes and works in LARP. And
100% agree.
I'll go into that. Yes and is great for improv acting. However, there are 3 other terms that are far better for LARP. Yes, but, and no and. These give your DM these are the tools that your DM has in order to more appropriately maintain control over their story while also still giving you that value that you want out of that improv back and forth. Yes, but, yes, this works, but its effect is not as what you expected. Yes, this works, but, or yes, you can, but you must do this first. Mm-hmm. Or no, but you could do it this way. No, you can't do it this way. And, here is what happens from that. It's still that same improv storytelling aspect, but it changes the script on how it works. It's instead of just saying this is fact and then this is fact, it gives the opportunity to say, sure, here are the conditions though. It's a better way, in my mind, it's a better way for DMs and storytellers at LARP and even tabletop to more appropriately pursue that improv acting experience while also still giving conditional elements that have your players acting in the story and working in the story rather than just acquiescing to what their demands are. So when they ask the question, can I close that portal? You can say yes, but in order to do so, you need this. And now they have a quest to go on. Now they have a mission rather than just, yes, it's done.
Yeah.
Nobody, like, sure, narratively, you as the player will, in your mind, always say, I want to solve this. But it's not as fun when you can't also involve other people or really play into that storytelling aspect. So really, like, my advice to everyone for how to get more from your DM is think in questions and remember yes, but, no, but, and no, and. Yes, and is out the window here.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Something you said. Oh, you want to go first, Jake?
Yeah, I just have a short thing. Even if you don't ask a question, I know at a personal preference, I don't like questions, but I totally agree with everything Steve just said there. I like it when people say they want to try something. I feel like the word try
there we go. That.
is very important.
Yeah, it's the language. It's the language of expectation that, like, you're not demanding. It's the question of can I. So even using just saying, like, statements with try in it really still helps sell that and give that impression.
Absolutely. Okay.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. Like, it's a lot easier for when I'm running other content, like whether it's a DM or as a narrator in training, it is so much. I appreciate hearing I'm going to try because instead of I will, because I will. This thing the portal, for example, we'll go back to the portal. I'm going to try to close the portal is, okay, cool, like you have an like it shows that the player has an understanding that it might not be possible as opposed to I will close the portal. Because it's like, well, what if you can't? Like, I'm sorry, but
right, it sets you up for an immediate no, you can't. And that sucks for a DM to have to start off by saying, well, let me reset your expectation before going forward.
And that is both in LARPing and like tabletopping. I found like, and even like, okay, as dorky as this is, I'm gonna go all the way back. Even with online role playing, that is the most important thing. Is you never want to set the bar by saying I will hit you with this sword, like by immediately saying that you are hitting that person, because your roll to hit might not prove that you actually did, or for whatever reason you might not be able to follow through with that will. So automatically saying, even whether it's a question, can I try to close this portal, or I'm going to try to close this portal, are both way more accessible to either pulling it off or failing. And going into just some earlier stuff, like a big thing with getting engaged into plot, whether it's on like D, and this is accessible again for both LARPing or D&D, like sometimes I know it's really hard. There are so many times that I wanted to and didn't. Don't be afraid to like speak up, and throw out your ideas, because even if you make the throw and you miss by a little bit, a different player might catch it and help you. If your idea doesn't fully make it to the base, other people can give you advice, and now look at that, your idea with collaboration of everybody else made it. Like, it became the idea that solved the problem, like, and it's working together, and nothing harmful comes out of either pitching an idea or taking initiative. Like, it's nothing bad comes out of when they say, we need a team leader for this mission. And I know it's hard because sometimes being hesitant is just when you're scared to take initiative happens, but worst case, you say, I'll do it, and then they pick somebody else, or I'll do it, and then even if you don't have it in you, other people will be there to help you out if you take initiative and then you're not fully ready. And that's the big part of a community, is teamwork with that.
I will say, in regards to this is, I had a train of thought and it just left the station. Alright. Wow. I was ready and then I was just phew.
Yeah, you sounded real like certain there.
I know you have like.
Alright. If I remember, we'll go back to it and I'll just edit it in, because that's.
I know.
Nice.
And then.
but I mean, it might, because I mean, it's been like an ambient thing that we've discussed in between stuff, but the player's approach to a game, I feel like is very important too, like the setting your own expectations.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And, well, with that, I can easily say, it's vitally important to go up to your DM and kind of describe how you play the game. Like, whether you want to just be a murder hobo and fight some baddies, or if you want to kind of role play more, or if you want to do a bit of both. That way the DM can properly assess what kind of encounters they're going to throw.
Yes, yeah.
I think that also kind of goes back to what I think it was I probably both Ray and Jacob said regarding, you know, your DM and like storyteller personality, like being known as a player rather than being known only as a storyteller. It really helps when your storytellers are also like friendly, personable. They have that social presence that lets them feel like they are approachable.
Yeah.
Because like I gotta say, when I first started LARPing, I could not approach a single one of the storytellers. I felt so intimidated by them because they felt so separate. Now, admittedly, that was my first impression because I was brand new coming into something I'd never done before, and some of them did work towards making that change, like not necessarily making that change, but also showing that they were personable, that they were friendly, that they could be talked to, whereas some others didn't and remained on that kind of far-reaching plateau away from me. And so that made it hard to communicate with them. That made it hard to really feel like I could interact with them. So I absolutely agree that your storytellers, like, you're not on a pedestal. Don't put yourself on a pedestal. Don't let anyone put you on a pedestal. Be on the same ground as your players in all circumstances.
That's why I kind of detest the saying that the DM is God, because I don't like that. I don't like being referred to as God. And like, it's kind of true in a sense that I'm the one running the show, but I don't want I want the players to feel like I have total, absolute mad power that I'm going to use for no particular reason.
Yes, yeah.
The DM is not God. The DM only plays God.
Yes, yeah.
I'm still a person like you. I just happen to be the story. That's why I like the word storyteller about it, because that's really, at the end of the day, what I'm doing. You're the main characters. I'm telling a story.
Very much, when it comes to the pedestal thing, I almost disagree a little bit. I think it's okay to be up on a pedestal if your players throw you there, because then you can take a player and like trade. Because I feel like at the end of the day, even in any social environment, people like to feel good. They like to be praised. And one of the approaches I try to do, and I guess it semantically it is the same thing as stay at the same level, is when people do that, I like to then like exchange that with players and be like, oh no, wait, you're doing awesome too. Look at this, this, and this. Or even as players amongst each other, try to talk about other people's characters more.
We do agree. I think my language is a little different. There is where I look at the pedestal as like the unreachable. The spotlight is, in my mind, what you're talking about is the spotlight. The spotlight anyone can get into. You should put people in the spotlight, but putting them on a pedestal makes them unreachable.
If that's
you know. Like,
yeah,
does that make sense?
Absolute sense. And then in that case, I do agree with you. You should never be unreachable. It's a social event. If you're unreachable, you're not part of the social construct there, and it gets weird.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
I do want to kind of reinforce what was mentioned earlier, because hearing Steve talk about his experience very much reminded me of my own. And because, like, listen, I won't sugarcoat it. I got some social anxieties. Particularly if I'm in a large group of people and I know, like, nobody.
Oh, yeah.
I panic freeze up and I don't talk to people. And that was how my first LARP almost went. I think there's a very, going back to the responsibility of veteran players, there is a mentality I like to call, like, the calling on the shy kid in class.
Yeah.
Because any good teacher will recognize a shy kid that isn't talking but is very much paying attention, and they call on him and they know the answer. but they're too nervous to raise their hand. And I think that in LARP, you should do that. I think in some instances in tabletop, you should do that as far as if you see someone that is not doing much. Because you want people to interact, you want people to have a good time.
Yeah.
And
I mean, that brings us back to our rule of 10 feet.
Yes, yeah.
yeah, exactly.
Which
if there's anything I want people to take away from this is the rule of 10 feet.
I like in the idea of live action role play rather than improv. I like to practice something I like to coin as inviting people. So I do it as a DM, I do it as a player. If somebody's like in the middle of doing something, I invite them to tell me what it looks like if we're in that realm of pretend, right? If we have to make believe that a spell looks like something.
Oh my goodness, yes.
I very commonly will like ask somebody what it looks like, because that makes people feel good. That gives them that oh, I'm part of this too. So I think that's another thing that you can include in that rule of 10 feet of make sure to invite people to contribute to the story as well. Especially as a GM, asking people like what their stuff looks like, or as a player, and just making sure other people have a dialogue in the story. That's also another way you can really boost the game overall, and people notice when you do that.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. And I'll harp a little on the notion of like favoring casters in games. I love knowing how people do their casting. As someone who has spent probably way too long putting a lot of work into the specific shapes, designs, and kind of process in the way I do my own casting.
Yeah.
I love hearing the amount of the kind of work people put into that stuff, and I feel like there's a lot more that can go into the other kinds of classes. It's just very prominent when it comes to casters for that sort of thing. But definitely look to your crafters and ask how they do their stuff. Look to your warriors and ask how they train. Look to your rogues, ask what kind of things they keep on them. Everybody's got something that they do with that.
I
I feel like this is a great topic to bring up when we move on to our episode about costuming and that sort of deal.
Yeah.
I will say specifically, and this is real quick. Another thing is invite people to spar in LARPs. I know most LARPs have skills and stuff, but just be like, hey, let's just do a spar. First to 10 hits wins. No skills, just swinging back and forth. That gets the blood pumping, and it's so much fun.
Yeah.
And it would still be in game because you can just spar. Definitely do that if you're and if you're looking for something to do. And plus you gain something out of it. You become a better fighter.
Yeah.
I would love to talk about this, but I want to spend an hour alone on this.
So, with immersion,
another episode.
Yeah, there's definitely, I think, when it comes to role playing, there's definitely what both Jake and Steve, I can go on forever about the immersion level between all three classes in that regard. I try to be very descriptive with the magic when doing it because it doesn't hurt anybody, and I feel like explaining the way that something looks only helps people with role-playing because then you know how to appropriately respond to what you're looking at. And say if I do a spell and I describe that, okay, there's fire, somebody's fear in-game might be fire, and now they can react accordingly, and it blossoms RP and it creates gateways for more interactions. Just like how the sparring also, it doesn't hurt because then you can spend more time to be more flowy with your combat to kind of roleplay your combat. You don't have to worry so much about going, okay, backpedal, don't trip, you don't have to worry so much about being in the heat of combat, and you can have that fun and not have to worry about, okay, I have to call 10,000 skills, I have this many spell slots left. And even with, say, not casters and fighters, or just players in general, the items, there's nothing wrong with having small things because it's more ways to just kind of bring in roleplay. If I'm a big trinket person, especially on my characters. I feel like it doesn't hurt, and sure, I might look like a flashy mess, but a lot of the items have a meaning to them. They're not just there to be there.
So, for anyone listening right now and hearing all this kind of what might seem like just tangential storytelling here, all of this does tie into the one very good overarching topic that we've kind of been dancing around pretty much the whole episode. It is the importance of communication.
Yes.
Communication is not just I tell you something, like the DM tells you something, the players tell DM something. Communication goes far beyond that. There are so many different ways to communicate.
Yeah.
Communication is the way you carry yourself, the way you walk. When you walk with a limp, you are telling someone, you're telling everyone around you something. You're telling them that you're injured.
Mm-hmm.
When you wear certain pieces of costuming, you're telling something about your character. When you're, and then there's narrative communication where, for example, you say your healing powers come from the use of this purifying fire. When you go to a person dying on the ground and say, sure, the character might not hear you, but you are saying this out loud as a form of narrating for the player to react. You go up to them, say, I'm sorry that this is going to burn, but it's going to help you. You're going to feel better, and then you heal them. The player now knows how to react because you communicated the effect to them in a way that isn't just breaking the immersion. You're still keeping yourself immersed in the game while also being able to interact with another person in a way that isn't just, I tell you this, you tell me this. So communication goes way beyond just verbal interaction, goes way beyond, any one form or another. It's all these different ways that we communicate with each other, whether it's body language, visuals, or even coming down to sparring and fighting. The way you fight tells something about you as well. On one hand, if you're brand new to LARPing and you fight and spar with somebody and you get the crap kicked out of you, one, you're telling somebody that you're new, but it's not a bad thing. Because you can always learn how to be a better LARP fighter. You can always learn how to be better at these things. And that's good, because what that does tell someone is, I am new. And that person might then go and, react to that by saying, great, you're new. I would love to take you under my wing. I would love to help you. Let me help you now. No matter what, everything is always a conversation. And that's, I might be alone in this, and this might be my one controversial topic here, but I do not believe internal roleplay matters. It doesn't matter if you're not showing it. If you're not communicating it to someone else, no one's gonna, it's not helping tell the story.
Yeah.
You can let, and like I said, this is my opinion on this, you can let, internal decisions play a part in what you do externally, and that's fine. You can have all these internal mechanisms, but I have watched in the past people be upset that no one's paying attention to their internal role
Oh, well.
No one's paying attention to that internal trauma. I can't react to what you're not showing me. And that is so important. If your character's upset about something, show me, tell me, do something to indicate it. If you're upset about something and you're brooding in the corner, even that alone, that little bit, that sitting with your hand in your head at the table is enough. Mm-hmm. That's so much. It's important. And so that is my stance on that.
Yeah.
Your internal roleplay is not important unless something external happens to help the conversation.
Yeah. First
of all, that is communication there.
I do have to say that is a wonderful segue, Steve. My hat's off to you. Thank you for stealing my job there. But whatever. I'm gonna agree and disagree with your point. I think internal role playing is essential for external role playing, because LARP, and it depending on the tabletop is acting in a way. You kind of have to LARP more so. You are becoming a character, and you kind of have to have the mindset of the character. Mm-hmm. So while yes, you're not going to show everything that's on your mind, you need to have things that your character would have you on your mind to enhance the way that you act.
Absolutely.
I was a goblin bread salesman, which is still one of the funniest characters I think I've ever come up with. And, as anyone that plays a merchant or anyone that you're idle and standing by, you can't look idle and just wait. You kind of have to, shift things about, write stuff down, and kind of have, a look of, why am I getting no customers? Kind of, shout out, make noise, but it's all on a basis of what's going inside your head.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and I'm not disagreeing with that. I'm saying it's good to have internal mechanisms that produce external stimuli. Like, it's good to have stuff that helps you make those external actions that lead to the conversation. But if you only ever have this internal monologue that you never let out, then it's not possible for someone to react to that. Like, what you're saying is that or at least what I'm gathering is that you're saying that it's good to have internal monologue, internal roleplay, because it leads to external.
Yes.
I agree with that. What I'm saying is, if your internal never becomes external, there's no point to it.
Yeah, I definitely understand. Like, if you're responding to something only in-game in your head, like, that's great. Like, you're really keeping the character by thinking in that process. But if you don't proceed to do a physical or out loud external response to it, no one's going to know that you're having an issue to begin with. And then, I mean, and that's fine if you don't want people to bring it up. But if you want something to come out of it, then
be like struggles.
Because internal is definitely very pivotal for a lot of different things. For sure.
I will say, if anybody listening wants to be a gold star student in communication, I can safely say understanding the lore and understanding another player's character, and specifically like doing some research on your own to help communicate with that character goes a long way.
Definitely.
Not only just for you, because then you'll understand the world better, but like, I'm gonna use Ray over here as an example, just because Ray plays a character that is a dragoon. Now, me knowing next to nothing about dragoons, but like I love dragons, looking into dragoons and researching them and like understanding them as a class will allow me, in fact, to communicate better with the internal struggles of what Reno goes through. If like there's something that's messing with the dragon spirit they're connected to, or like something along those lines, it allows you as a player to understand what's happening, and then you can kind of communicate it better to the other player. Be like, oh, hey, is everything all right? And they'll tell you, and you'll understand. You won't be like confused and not know how to help.
I mean, and even like if you don't know anything about it, so say like vampires, you don't understand the concept of much of it, that's still okay. And because then at that point you can go up to say a witch hunter or even the Dampiers and be like, hey, can you teach me more about this? And then that's still a way to get engaged based off of the lore of the world. Using the lore of the world to get involved is also really a good like starting point for veterans and new players alike.
It's also like building off of that. It's really fun to find like a subject matter in the lore that you like, and then going talking to different people about it, as if it were like, you know, an RPG game like Skyrim or whatever, because everyone has a different opinion and view on that. Like if your character follows a certain god, like I don't know, Valos, and
Valos
you'll just
being the god of justice.
Yeah. And you go and talk to one person and you're like, oh, he's all right. And you go talk to 3 other people and they go, oh, Valos, he's like the Chad of gods. And you're like, I didn't know people thought of him that way.
Yeah, no, that's...
Valos is one of the gods in the KR system, and also happens to be the god that my character follows. And I was just talking out of experience there. But yeah, definitely get differentiating opinions on a certain topic, because
especially
then you will
gods.
learn more about the world and other players and how they perceive things that you may perceive, and it could influence you on following up on that subject. Jacob, you were going to say something.
When I first started playing a Scion, my ideas of like what I was going to do mainly came from my friend group at the time, none of which were casters. So I got to game, and I immediately started bugging the heck out of Randy. Randy is a friend of ours from Night Realms, and like delved into that lore. And I can't stress enough how much it will improve you're able to interact or even roleplay by knowing not only exactly what you are, but what the people are around you, and being able to really react and work with that fluidly after you have that known.
I will say specifically for LARP, because like if you start a tabletop game, more than likely you already know the people that you're playing with, unless you're just joining a random game at like a comic book shop.
Yeah,
But
or yeah, like AL.
With LARP, I recommend making it kind of a goal to get to know the people outside of game.
Yes.
Yeah.
That makes communicating with them, especially if you got social anxiety like me, way easier because now you know them. You know who they are outside of their character. And it helps even more if you can become cool with them. You can talk with them about stuff. You find common interests. You become friendly. Then when you interact in player characters, you have some more wiggle room to kind of explore. You kind of get more comfortable and in character and can almost start to work on a chemistry with the people you got to know. Even if they don't like your character, that's fine because now you have a chemistry of like,
yeah.
it's still a chemistry.
I mean, heck, I run into that all the time.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, as the people here know, and as I've said, I play a very not nice character, and sometimes that gives people an impression that I myself am not a nice guy.
Oh yeah.
So I make it a point when I am not my character to be very nice to people, to be very like, hey, let's talk, and not talk in the way my character normally will play. Because although I'm having fun there, I'm definitely less approachable than I am when I am myself. And it's very important to talk to people so you don't get those ideas. Because, I mean, yes, sometimes you run into the guy who's role-playing a jerk and might be a jerk at a game. But more often than not, what I find is that you go and talk to somebody and they're very different from their character. Especially like older LARPers who've gone through one or more characters.
I will say also, hammering home the importance of talking with the people that are running the show, and also because I've touched upon mental health. If you feel like you are like having a panic attack or you just need to talk to someone, I can guarantee you from my experience in the LARP community that there is someone there that will most likely like stop and listen. I recommend talking to one of the people in charge because that's like player safety is part of their job. But if you like know someone that you're particularly comfortable with, like a player, like say you have a best friend that got you into it, if they're a decent person, they'll stop and communicate with you. Communication doesn't just go from in-game. If you're having out-of-game issues, like while at game, do communicate that.
Yeah.
Like, do bring that up. Otherwise, because, you know, at the end of the day, we all want you to have fun. Don't try and push your problems aside if they are really eating at you.
Yeah, and actually, that just brought up a whole bunch of good things. So in a lot of the cons that I go to, I play I'm back to Adventures League D&D 5e again. But I wanted to touch on that one first, just because that one is something newer that I've seen. At a lot of the games that are being ran now, they have a system that is a at-a-game system to help look out for each other, and it's an index card, and you write certain stuff down on the index card if there's a scene that's making you uncomfortable, or you need a minute, and it's something new because I'm very much seeing that at LARP, not at a D&D table setting. So that was something that was great. And even at LARPs, at another LARP and this one, I do have alternate characters that are definitely very different to me and my main characters. So Jake, I try to add a game if that month my alt character Eldon, ex-alt, if she's more prevalent than my main that weekend, I try to go out of my way to make sure that people know, hey, I'm not a green meanie, and I luckily didn't face a lot of that because of the fact that Eldon was a second character, so people had known me long enough. But a lot of people who only have one character don't have that leg up, and that's why even using the OK check-in system, which is growing a lot in a lot of different LARP communities, it's a system. It's a series of hand symbols that are very simple, that you
either hold close to your chest, or if it's dark in a spot where it is visibly seen, that throughout a scene you do not have to interrupt it to check in with one another. And unless if it's specific symbols, then you can kind of add a game, be like, hey, like, is there something that I can do to help you to change the course of this scene? Because in the end, you don't want to be too harsh on somebody where it's not fun. Because that's the most important part, is that, sure, if two characters are arguing, that you are still out of game having a fun time and no one's uncomfortable.
Ooh, this has me on a thing that I wanted to talk about. In regards to communicating with your fellow players.
Yeah.
And the topic of PvP or CVC,
Ooh,
however
yep,
you want to look at it. So I'm going to start by saying I once upon a time followed this mentality, and it is, and it, you know, it was the climate at the time, but climates change. So previously in LARP, it was very commonplace to, when dealing with PvP, it was very much a, like, competition. It was a competition. It was you against the other player. Like, you wanted to beat them because you were trying to take their stuff. You were trying to kill them for whatever reason. Vengeance, whatever, it doesn't matter. The point is, it was like this, it was this competition, this you must win competition kind of deal. And that's just the way PvP was. While the PvE game didn't follow that same dynamic, PvP was its own animal. And so now I stand and say, ditch the dinosaur mentality. It is old, it's outdated, it doesn't work in games anymore. It's just not the climate of gaming. If you're trying to, like, Jacob and I have had these situations where we get at each other's throats in a game as our characters because we have these opposing views. And so, like, we've talked about it. I've done this with a couple others too. Like, it's good to talk about it ahead of time or even after the fact of, like, if we're gonna get at it, we'll say, like, hey, do you want this to escalate to a fight? Do we want this to escalate to whatever reason? Where do we want this going? You're still, like, even in a PvP setting, you're still doing a collaborative story. There might be times where you, like, fist fight somebody in a game because, you know, they killed your best friend or something, so you're getting vengeance or whatever. Like, it's still good to talk about it. It's still good to communicate with your friends because that, at the end of the day, you are friends. If you're going to fight someone, chances are you're comfortable enough with them to have the conversation with them. And even if you've had that conversation before where you have this blanket, like, whatever we do is whatever we do, then that's fine, but you still talked about it. And that's so important. Like, I know there have been times where Jacob and I have gotten into spats where, like, I remember, like, a couple times we were just, like, at each other's throats in the middle of the inn. One point, you took the fall for a crime you didn't commit against me.
Oh my goodness.
Like,
oh yeah, I remember that one.
Like, that level of communication, though, really helps settle that it's not a competition, that it is still collaborative storytelling, even if it is, PvP. Though I will say, the one thing that still breeds that spirit of competition, and a lot of games still have this, is when you have a LARP where there are a limited amount of times you can die as a character. And this is still a standard practice, and I'm not saying it's a bad practice, but it is something that breeds that. When you look at PvP and you only have a certain amount of lives, you look at it like it is a competition, because if you die, you're closer to never being able to play the character again. Now, what we did in Night Realms is we ditched that. And some will say it was a bad decision to say that you have unlimited lives. It takes the fear of death away. I disagree. I think that what it does is it helps support the conversation when you look at those kinds of scenarios. It helps people be more comfortable saying, yeah, it makes sense that you want to get vengeance on me. I'm okay dying because I know it's not going to bring me closer to losing my investment. Because when you look at LARP, especially a campaign LARP, it is an investment. You are spending tons of money to be that costume, that character, everything you've built up, and it does suck to lose it. So by having no limited deaths, by having this unlimited deaths kind of system, you encourage people more to talk to each other, and death can be Death is as scary as you choose as the player to make it. No one else can change that decision for you. So if you say death's not scary because you have unlimited lives, that's your choice to not put yourself in the headspace of just dying in general. Regardless of how many times you can do it, sucks.
Yeah.
But that's off topic to what I'm really getting at. So that system allows us, that endless death system allows us to create a more open communication scenario where people can feel like they can talk to each other about PvP, whereas in others, you really are negotiating a player's lifespan of a character, like in absolute, concrete, tangible facts.
Yeah, because you're shrinking down the longevity of the character by taking a fragment away. Yeah, I heavily agree with that. It becomes a lot more of a deal at a LARP where a character has a expiration date than when a character you could play for 20 years without that concern.
So I'm going to take a stance. Now it's my turn to be controversial, because I agree with a lot of what Steve said and a lot of what Ray is saying, but I also disagree on some points, and like, they're my opinions, and nobody is wrong to have a differing opinion. I know, like, I prefer games that have like finite systems to how many times the player can go, and I to a degree enjoy that like PvP aspect of you can only come back so many times, but I also believe it has its place. And no matter what, no matter which system you're in, communication is absolutely the key. This applies between players, this applies between DM and players. You look at like player-on-player stuff, now you might not always have the chance to talk to somebody ahead of time, right? Some things are out of instinct, or you're like, I want to rush this person, so if I talk to them ahead of time, it'll kind of ruin that moment, but I'm gonna make sure I talk to them at the end of it. You always just want to make sure you're talking with people, and that everybody's friends and nobody's hurt. And if somebody is hurt by it, you come at them with compassion and not not that haha I won attitude, because it's definitely not a game anybody would want to play when it comes to that. And as far as like players griefing other players, yeah, that's bad. I feel like everybody should agree that's bad, and I don't think I'm in the minority of saying that. But I had a thought, and it stopped. But anyway, so you go, I enjoy PvP. I enjoy that whole notion. I think me and Steve have a very healthy PvP relationship that he talked about, where we talk a lot. We know what each other's cool with, and just go for it. But I feel like it's only that way because we are so vocal. So hey, the theme of this podcast, I guess, is communication. Not to keep beating that horse.
I mean, it's a good thing to keep beating, because some people won't. There are a couple points I want to bring up in regards to, because we were heavy focused on LARP, and there were some mentions. This does translate easily into tabletop, like especially if you're in a campaign where it's a heavy theme. And like I experienced recently, one of my players, who's a dear friend of mine, was missing their parents due to quarantine, right? And a lot of the characters in the LARP have some parental edgy backstory. And they told me ahead of time, and then I saw one scene was coming up, and then I kind of like paused it and was like, all right, this is going to be heavy. And they kind of like took their headphones off, and like I was like, listen, this is going to be heavy. I'm going to be like talking about some heavy subject. If you're not ready for it, I encourage you to like step away for a second, and I will let you know when to come back. And I think being a considerate player and also being a considerate DM goes a long way, because you do want to tell like edgy people's backstories, right? It's fun for them to be like, my dad, like, he kicked out me and my mom when I was young, and my mom died because of him.
Yeah.
But some people don't want to hear that. But you want that one player to get it while also still having the story for the other players. And you kind of like delegate your time to saying certain things that people are comfortable with missing out, and then also getting back to the whole party overall story.
That made me think of something.
I do also want to address the PvP thing because there is, in my mind, a kind of a difference when it comes to in relation to tabletop. And I'm going to preface this by saying I cannot stand tabletop PvP. I absolutely hate it. It's not fun for me. And the reason why is if you die in Dungeons and Dragons, it's either because A, you were outmatched by the monster, or B, you did something stupid, or you tried to do something and it failed. But if you're fighting someone else and they are inherently, either they have a more stacked setup, they're getting better rolls, they're a more experienced player, it feels like you're being robbed of your character. Because someone else was like, I'm just gonna go and kill you. That goes into the competition thing.
Yes,
like,
yeah.
In that sort of setting, you're really looking at somebody who is staring at and studying their literal mathematical statistics to beat yours. Like, in those instances, it really does kind of come down to a competition thing. And I'm having been a D&D PvP player at times, I can say, like, from my own experience, I don't even think I ever had a good reason. The last reason I ever had in PvP was I killed another player because I was 500 experience away from leveling. Like, that sucks. That's awful. Yeah, it was horrendous. It was such a bad reason for doing it.
I was gonna say,
you're good.
Yeah,
Go
when
ahead.
it comes to tabletop, I think we could even cycle further and go. It has to do with that social contract. Does everybody here know you're gonna get into a game where somebody might just kill you for 500 experience, or know that they're going into a game where they have to work as a group? Or is one person playing a paladin that has to attack everything that's evil, and is another person in the group a necromancer? And blatantly
Ooh, there's a fun little side of this that does not get explored a lot. It's easy to say, well, yeah, the evil guy's gonna PvP, like or tell the evil person that you shouldn't PvP. It's another thing when you look at the paladin in a group of rogues who's then gonna go around trying to like beat up all the rogues in the party for doing what rogues do.
Yeah.
Like, that's still PvP. That's still the force of, like, you're trying to exert your PvP on everyone else to have your way. Like, in D&D, PvP, unless it is specifically designed for it, doesn't really, unless the game is designed for it, doesn't really work, because it is, like, that is a small group party scenario. You are going in almost always with the intention of you're there to work together. I mean, the difference then, you look at Vampire the Masquerade, World of Darkness games, like, that has the PvP element built into it.
Yeah.
That's a different story than like Dungeons and Dragons.
So, a different type of PvP that I feel like we've very been focused on the physical PvP, but a type of PvP that doesn't get brought up enough, I think, is social PvP. I had an amazing, experience with my buddy Larry. Larry Weil, he goes to the Night Realms with us. Amazing guy, love him to death. But we do a lot of social PvP, and it's one of those things where all PvP, if you are engaging in it, I personally believe that you should be ready to be engaged in whichever manner the other person decides. If it falls within the confines of the game you're in, right? If I'm sitting there and I'm at, let's say I'm at Feast, and I'm just sitting there yelling at Alistair for the entire time, right? Which is not out of question. I would totally be cool if Steve got up and started fighting me on an out-of-game level, because, yeah, that's a response. PvP is more broad than just I ran up and stabbed you for 500 experience. It's
yeah.
It's
yeah. There's that verbal
Exactly.
aspect, and I definitely think I've had my fair share of PvP or CVC, but like at most LARPs, all of my CVC is vocal, and it's that social aspect of getting into a argument and going at each other with words rather than with a weapon or with a physical harm intention. And even in that, it's still really important to communicate at a game to make sure that you don't overstep, because I know for certain if Mushtrov came up to Reno at our LARP and started blasting me for something, and I did not get told immediately, like ahead of time, I, the player, Ray, would start crying because I need to be. It's one of those things where communication is so key. It's so important to warn people of, hey, are you okay with this?
Yeah.
And sometimes
Absolutely.
with vocal, sorry to cut you off.
No, you're good.
Sometimes with vocal and with social PvP, a warning does not always kind of. Sometimes you don't know that you're going to end up chewing somebody out for something. Like me and one of the many Bens at Night Realms, he played a character that for a while walked a very polar opposite path to mine. Seth was he ran a very complex path. We didn't sometimes have the time to communicate because suddenly one of our characters, it's very interesting. One of our characters would do something to provoke the other one, and it would turn out into we're screaming outside the inn, people are running out thinking we're murdering each other, but in the end, we didn't check on each other beforehand, but we checked on each other afterwards. And even if it's a simple, putting your hand on your head to indicate you're at a game going, hey buddy, are you okay, is still important. Because it knows that you guys, in the end, you guys are friends and don't hate each other. Sometimes your characters just get a little in a spat.
I really want to back that up, because there are times where you will play a character that, like Jacob here plays an evil character, or, I play an annoying character. And sometimes, especially if you're a new player, your character isn't exactly beefy, and then someone wants to just run up and be like, hey, I'm gonna stab you.
Yeah.
And I'll be like, I can't do anything, and now I've been stabbed. So I do think that communication, very important, especially with new players.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to kind of transition to a lighter topic, because we've really hammered home how vitally important communication is for players. And that is another thing we've been dancing around, which is LARP versus tabletop. And as players, what are the kind of different mindsets you go into for your characters? What are the kind of different preparations you make? Like, what, from a player's perspective, is the difference going into each of these different role-playing experiences?
I don't physically feel like garbage after playing D&D. That's my first one.
Yeah, but I also have less fun playing D&D. To be very forward.
Yeah, no,
I mean, I will say I've never dislocated my shoulder playing LARP.
What? Wait.
Yet.
What?
That sounds like a story. That's an
This is a really quick story.
Well, I think Steve was going to say something, so go to him after this.
No. My noise of exasperation was at dislocating your shoulder playing D&D. Tell this story. We have so little precious time left.
So, for background, I have dislocated my shoulder twice, and I've gotten surgery, and then sometimes if I move it the wrong way, it'll just pop out, and because of the stuff in it, I will pop it back in. Disclaimer to anyone that is like, ugh. Anyway, I was getting really into a certain scene, and I don't want to go too much details because it's a little NSFW. Essentially, I was being that stereotypical bard. Right?
Oh no.
And this was one of those fun D&D things where we allowed anything, and we got sucked into the Skyrim opening. We all collectively blacked out. We woke up on the cart, and there the guy was saying, I see you're finally awake. And we just played out like we were in Skyrim. And my character decided that the female guard at the beginning, who orders to cut your head off, they want to hook up with that. And so I have to roll, and I roll, and I have a back and forth with the DM, and it's agreed that I did, in fact, seduce it. And I get so excited, I throw my arms out in celebration, and my left shoulder pops out. And I'm like, wow. And I get up, and I put it back in, and I'm just like, that's never happened before. I've never gotten so excited while playing D&D that, my arm just came out.
Oh my god.
Did you say that in character too?
Legos?
No, unfortunately, I broke out of character. But you know, I love that story so much. 'cause
God,
it
that-
gets people concerned.
That made me think of something like, just real quick, if you at a game get hurt for any reason, as much as you might want to, it is so not a good idea to stay in character. Because at a LARP, I've successfully and unsuccessfully have fallen down a cliff before. Well, down a cliff, off a cliff. Either way, if you skin your knee, don't proceed to run towards a queen to bow to her. Just go get the thing cleaned, like.
Yeah, no, that is.
Your dedication will not be forgotten if you have to step away.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. But Jacob, what were you going to say?
Jeez, I don't remember.
Yeah, the train has made it back to the station. All our thought processes are in the can now.
I will say that D&D is always going to be more tame, because we're talking about getting hurt playing D&D. But really, when it comes to like a difference between the two, like approaching a LARP and approaching D&D and getting prepared for it, one thing people don't always prepare for with LARP is just how much physical activity it is. How much like hiking, how much running around
absolutely.
and doing stuff, and or like the situations you might run into. Me and somebody who I was good friends with at the time, Gene Messick, were walking in the woods, and we suddenly found a whole bunch of coyotes surrounding us. And that was like kind of scary. Granted, in retrospect, they were probably just curious. I hope they were just curious, but that's besides the point. You're not going to run into that at a tabletop, and if you do, I'm very surprised. Just like I'm very surprised that Kyle dislocated his shoulder at a tabletop. You need to pack.
It's a very
you need
isolated
to pack your socks. You need to pack a change of clothes. You need to make sure to shower. Whereas a tabletop. You're just going for the day. You might be done with school, be like, hey guys, let's hang out. Let's go play some Dungeons and Dragons. And it's a lot easier to pick up into and just go. Whereas a LARP, it's like, alright, I'm doing it this weekend, let's go. You have like that 3-day sprint, or at least I have a 3-day sprint to get ready for a LARP.
And so that's the physical aspect is definitely a really big one. For sure, because you don't feel the battle damage, and you don't see the bruises from your fights that following Monday when you could barely get out of bed to make it to class.
When you look at LARP, you really it is looking at it as it is a sport. When you really break it down to it, LARP is a sport, and that is a notion that will shatter the boundaries of people's perceptions when they say it can't be. There are points, there's goals, there's uniform. Damn, it's a sport.
It's a sport.
I will say, between tabletop and LARP, while you will still LARP eliminates something that you have to do constantly in D&D tabletop games, where you kind of explain what you're doing, what you're seeing, and like everything. There's a lot. It allows the avenue of communication to be more physical. You can physically look sad, and people could be like, "That person is sad," instead of saying, "My character is sad," and they'd be like, "Oh, noted."
Yeah.
I like both.
I've recently
like,
been
that's
having
just
trouble
me.
with that. My newest character, I'm struggling to tell, like, to show people that I'm feeling emotions. It might be the fact that I wear a straw bag on my head, but on my head. But let's move on.
Yeah. I mean, with some D&D games, like, AL, a lot of that goes to the sidelines, because it's you follow a set storyline and the end. But like in more personal campaigns, like a lot of big things at my tabletop, less so like from a DM perspective, like when I ran plot, I would tell people, you physically see a guy curled up in the corner, tears streaming down his face. But like, as when I was a player, I would sit there and tell my friends, like, hey, heads up, I physically will sit there as if I was my character. So I would sit there, like, with my legs folded, like, you know, like,
straight posture, like, so if I physically got gloomy, they would know that was my character. And again, that's where communication comes in, letting them know, hey, the way I sit in this chair is the way that my character physically is at that time. But that also was a lot of the LARP in me, when it came to that.
I will say, as far as similarities go, water.
Yeah, water.
Very much. Snacks.
Bathroom
Eat,
breaks.
Bathroom breaks. Please do things that take care of yourself in both situations. I cannot stress it out. Like,
Just, like, casually remain a functioning human.
Yeah.
Yeah, I give the pass, because LARPing, well, it depends on the kind of LARP, I can say, at least for KR, it's kind of like camping. Well, it is camping.
Yeah.
So, like, and especially because of how late you go, like, me personally, I won't get on you if you, like, you know, don't get a reasonable amount of sleep because you're staying up till 6 a.m. doing a mod. That's whatever. But still do, like, some basic human functions so that you
Can make it through the weekend.
can make it through the weekend and, like, you don't screw up your daily schedule too much.
Yeah.
Like, I'll still try to get to bed at, like, 2 a.m., maybe 3 a.m. at LARP as opposed to, like, when I typically would. So I recommend at least trying to keep healthy in some regards. Very much driving home. I know you can get very into the thick of it, and like the adrenaline's pumping, and you forget to eat. Keep a power bar on you. Keep a water bottle, that looks like it's in game, on you.
And
so you
even
don't
then,
know.
if you don't have one, if you want to still keep a water bottle on you, don't let that stop you. Just take the label off. Taking the label off is an extra mile, because then at that point it's just it's better than carrying nothing.
I have
Oh yeah.
worn myself ragged from LARP events to the point where I have on the way home pulled over, went to sleep, realized I've slept for 8 hours, drove home, and got home at the time I would normally wake up. And that was still okay.
Oh my
But
goodness.
you have to make sure you check yourself when you're out there.
Yeah.
I think we're gonna spend a whole 2 hours one day going on about how to take care of yourself in LARP.
All on its own.
You know what? But
is.
like that's a good podcast, not just for LARP, but for people in general.
Stay tuned. We're going to get on some of our LARP health experts here, and we're going to talk about staying healthy while gaming.
Making it home while driving is important when you have longer than 40 minutes at the wheel, because like I have an hour and 40, and I know what waves I'll start like nodding out. I'm like, it's either when I hit this point or this point, and if I didn't hit it at point 1, point 2 is going to be extra rough. Like
And I think just to kind of wrap up a bit, if you're going to take anything away from this player-led podcast, 1, the 10-foot rule. I really like that. 2, communication is really important. Really. And 3, at the end of the day, everyone should be having a good time. Everyone should be having fun, game runners included.
And go to your second event.
I don't know.
yeah,
Always go to the second
event.
First one doesn't work out.
You know
go to
what?
the second
Yes.
one. Well, with that, I have been, will be, and continuously am always Kyle. Thank you, Steve, Jacob, and Ray, for joining me on this edition of the Tavern Talk. Won't you join us next time? Please hit the like button and subscribe and do all that fun stuff. And I hope you all have a wonderful week.